serial production, but it's like 90% of the tanks that roll out are refurbished, not actually production. So things are going to look hairy for the Russian military in about 2 or 3 years, which means that we have to really commit to ensuring the Ukrainians in the fight, at least until then. And that, of course, has the critical assumption that the Chinese don't become more decisively involved in supporting the war. And it also assumes that the Russians don't miraculously improve their ability to manufacture new vehicles. The Russians have managed to create a whole lot of new drones and things like that through technology changes, which is wrong. So it's not completely impossible to drastically improve their production.
Yeah, because that's what I wanted to ask in terms of Russian allies, North Korea, Iran, China. How do you see their dependency on weapons growing over time? Do you think that those allies will be receptive of it?
Yeah, the jury's still out on that. There is clearly a coalition of these hostile states that's growing. The Russians and the Chinese have become much closer than they were in the past 5 years, and the Chinese have key interests in ensuring that Russia's invasion of Ukraine ends up not being a decisive Russian failure. If Putin can achieve the preferable outcome where somehow we achieve an armistice or a ceasefire where the Russian Federation can annex more territory and we are back in the might makes right world, that is very good for Putin. He's going to take that precedent and apply it to his revisionist agenda for Southeast Asia and Taiwan. The Iranians stand to benefit as well. The Iranians are getting cash hand over foot for their technology exchange and their production of drones. And the Iranians are also going to likely become the beneficiaries of other Russian technologies, satellite technology, space technology, ballistic missile technology. The North Koreans, I believe they're going to be the beneficiaries of satellite and space technology, as well as possibly submarine technology as well. These are non-very states have developed, as well as the Russians have. And if these different actors get their hands on each capabilities and increase the cost for our allied states to be able to do that.
What are your thoughts on visits by the Prime Minister of Hungary, Viktor Orban, to Kyiv, Russia and China?
It seemed that President Orban was trying to leverage his Hungary's participation in the EU presidency and doing these one-on-one visits to present Hungary and himself as a mediator or a negotiator on the behalf of the EU to show that, we can have negotiations, we can have a dialogue, we can have a back-end channel, that sort of thing, which of course the EU Commission just completely denied and said that it is not within based on what Hungary is doing now. I think Orban is, of course, one of Putin's agents within the European Union. Orban has undertaken a series of Trojan horse spoiling activities that advance Russia's agenda for weakening Europe, weakening NATO, and ultimately setting the proper conditions for Russia to be able to pursue revanchist agenda in Europe. And I think Orban was there to try to amplify this larger Russian-driven meta-narrative that, listen, this whole ugly business in Ukraine, it can all be over. There is a peace in our time that is on the horizon. All we have to do is come to the talking table with the reasonable Russians, and we can work a deal, and this will all go away. And I think having Orban go out there and make it seem like some Europeans are interested in that makes that information operation that much more amplified.
He also made the claim that China is neutral.
I'm not big on neutral. The Chinese have supported the Russians with informational support, political support, tacitly. They've given the Russians maneuvering space to be able to minimize and shirk responsibility for Russian war crimes in Ukraine. The Chinese proposed peace plan is also incredibly advantageous to revisionist states that want to destroy the rules-based international order And not to mention, there's a variety of Chinese businesses that engage in sanctions evasion and help the Russians source components and material and use technologies that are important for the Russian war machine. So yes, the Chinese are technically on paper, I suppose, independent in that they have not signed on to be a co-belligerent with Russia, but in practice, the Chinese objective is successful.
Another big witness is the Turkish President Erdogan, who said that he could help to end this war. However, we did hear that Putin's spokesperson said that he can't play as an intermediary. Do you think that we can see any future involvement from him?
It's possible. Let me answer the question with a different answer. The first thing is it's entirely, premature to have any sort of discussions about negotiations. The key actors that have to negotiate are Ukraine and Russia, and these two belligerents are on completely opposite sides of the coin right now. They're so far apart in terms of what they're doing on the battlefield, in terms of what their stakes are, in terms of what the negotiating positions are. Like, it is completely incompatible for negotiations. So I find the large amount of discourse now about, who could help facilitate negotiations? Well, there won't be. Can we have it sometime soon or sometime later? I think this is so incredibly premature, and I think that's part of the reason why the Russians are trying is they want something so it's peacetime, patience to run. So I find the premise of the discussion, the Russian information operation, number one. Number two, the actual question about Erdogan. The Russians have cooperated. They've cooperated Erdogan. They have a very unique relationship with Turkey. There was the whole Ankara process for the Syrian civil war that the Russians managed to get themselves into. There was, Astana's process, and the Turks bought S-400 air systems from the Russians. So there are some strange ties there. That the Russians have historically leveraged to try to drive wedges within the alliance. Turkey's position has solidified a little bit since the beginning of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. But it's very possible that they might try to facilitate any such Hungary or Orban.
Looking at the China-Russia relations more generally, they class it as a limitless friendship, but we have seen cracks in the framework there. What would you say is your current assessment of the situation now?
Yeah, well, it's very clear that Putin and Xi have, I think, aligned objectives when it comes to Ukraine. Not to the extent that he wants to support it, but Putin's really putting himself in a very strategically precarious position, because China wants to be the Russian lunch in Central Asia, where you have the former Soviet states, where the Chinese have been trying to use political and economic diplomacy to weasel its way and build dominant influence in the Belt and Road Initiative. Russia, of course, hates that, because Russia sees those former Soviet and Russian imperial subjects as being the rightful Russian territory. So I think Russia has made a decision that they're going to be okay with maybe ceding some leverage on a global grand scale to support Russian operational needs for the war in Ukraine. I think Russian power globally in the long term will likely deteriorate the decision. He does stand to eat some of Putin's lunch in Central Asia in the long term. So let's make no mistake that these autocrats, they have aligned objectives with others, unaligned objectives with others, and I think there are opportunities for us to try to exploit. But of course, that assumes that we ourselves have our own strategy for how we're going to go about these attacks. I'd also note that it's very interesting. It means that we have to start looking at the world and the theater in different ways. Here in Washington, we have Europe and we have Asia, and so two separate things, and the command, the resources, the strategic thinking for these two things are like housed in two entirely different organs. But with the coalescence of the Russians and the North Koreans and the Chinese and the Iranians, the Eurasian landmass is coalescing tighter